we're going to be looking at creating bar graphs. And to be able to create a bar graph, first we're going to be looking at the questions we need to ask to get data. Then we're going to be looking at the features of bar graphs. And then we're going to be creating a bar graph that has all of those features and elements in it. So first of all, what is a graph? A graph is a visual representation of data that we've collected. So before we can create a graph, we need data. Here's an example of some data I've collected. I asked students in 5J whether they think these characters are goodies, baddies, or if they were undecided. Then I've created a visual representation of that information. So in my data, you can see that 20 people thought Holiday was a good character, and there's a visual representation that 20 people thought Holiday was a good character. To be able to create a graph like that, we need to ask the right questions. And the types of questions that we need to ask are called statistical questions. Now, statistical questions have a limited number of responses that we can control. That means I can't ask a question that has too many possible responses because I won't be able to fit that into a graph. I won't be able to display that visually. There'll be too much information. Now, I also don't want to ask a question that only has one response, because if it only has one response, that's not enough information to be able to display visually. So have a look at these questions. 2 of them are really good statistical questions. 2 of them are not good statistical questions at all. And 2 of them could be better. Which ones do you think are good and which ones do you think aren't? Now let's look at this one. What is your favorite color? That's not a good statistical question at all because there's too many responses I could get. I've got a box of crayons that has 120 colors in it. I don't want to get 120 separate responses to what is your favorite color because I can't represent that in a graph. What is your favorite color of the rainbow? That's a much better statistical question because I only have 7 possible responses. There's only 7 colors in the rainbow. How many pets do you have? That's okay, but it's not fantastic. Now, I know that most people have between, let's say, 0 and 5 pets. So I know that probably most of my responses are going to be between 0 and 5, but I can't be sure. I can't completely control that. I could get someone who has 15 or even 20 pets. So just remember that one, it's okay, but it's not fantastic. Do you have a dog or a cat? Now again, that's not fantastic because some people could have both. Some people could have neither. So I haven't really given myself enough options in that question. Who is the principal? At Gerald Bomber, we only have one principal, so that's not enough information to be able to create a graph with. And what month is your birthday in? Now that's actually a really good statistical question because there's only 12 possible answers I could have. There's only 12 months in the year, so that's a really good one. What about the statistical question that you were asked on Friday? So when we did the Judgment Day activity on Friday and you had to tell whether characters were goodies, baddies, or undecided, what do you think the statistical question that was asked was? Have a think about that. And I'll give you a hint. It started with, do you think this character is? The statistical question that was asked on Friday would have been something like, do you think this character is a goodie, a baddie, or are you undecided? Now, I asked my students that earlier in the week on Wednesday, and this was the information they came back with. So the information that you'll be working with deals with quite a few more students because it's across all of year 5. This was just my class in 5J. So in 5J, 20 students thought Holiday was a goodie, no one thought she was a baddie, and no one was undecided. with Monica, the mother, 2 people thought she was a goodie, 10 people thought she was a baddie, and 8 were undecided. And the rest fall somewhere in between. Here are some bar graphs that I've created with that information. So I've taken this information and created bar charts. You can see that here I've created a bar chart about how many students thought that the character was a goodie. So number of students in 5J who think this character is a goodie, and there's my character names. Here I've created a bar graph that has the number of students in 5J that think this character is a baddie. Now notice some of my characters don't have a bar. That's because they're 0. Nobody thought Holiday was a baddie, nobody thought Cyrus was a baddie, and nobody thought Birdie was a baddie. And then this one is about what those students that were undecided. Now there's certain things that a bar graph must have. A bar graph must have a title. So here my title is number of students in 5J who think this character is a goodie. In addition to a title, I also need to have labels. So I need to label what I'm measuring. Here, my label is the characters, so Holiday, Cyrus, Monica, James, and Birdie. And here, it's the number of students. So I'm actually labeling the scale, which is the other thing that I need to have in my bar graph. I need to have, just like on a ruler or on a protractor, I need to have numbers to measure with. So here my scale goes from 0 to 20 because 20 was the number of students that I was surveying, and it goes in increments of 5. Now you'll see this graph, my scale goes in 2s. So you can have scales that go in 5s, in 2s, by 1s even. It's up to you. And some scales are going to make your graph easier to read than others. So for instance, looking at this graph, it might be a little bit difficult to see exactly how many students thought Monica was a goodie. But if I use this scale, it's very clear that it was 2 students that thought she was a goodie. So the scale you use is up to you. It just depends, it's to make your graph easier to draw and also easier to read. So I need a title, I need labels, I need a scale, and then I need bars in a bar graph. Now my bars need to be the same width. Obviously they're different heights depending on how many people thought each character was a goodie, but they need to be the same width. Each bar needs to be labeled, and each bar needs to have a gap in between it. Okay? So again, there's some examples of some bar graphs. Now, I can also create, with this same data, I can also create a grouped bar chart. Now, a grouped bar chart is taking subcategories and representing data with subcategories. So what I mean is, in this one, I had to have separate graphs for whether each character was a goodie, a baddie, or undecided. Here, I've done all of that in one graph. So I've said, here's Holiday, everyone thinks she's a goodie. Here's Monica, 2 people think she's a goodie, 10 people think she's a baddie, and 7 people are undecided. So I've taken all of this data in these 3 graphs and I've put them into one graph. And then this is a similar thing done a little bit differently. So here, instead of having the characters down here, I've had whether or not they're a goodie, a baddie, or undecided. Now, if I have a grouped bar chart, I still need all of the other elements that I had in this bar chart, but I also need to have a key. So in a grouped bar chart, once again, I need a title, I need labels, I need to have a scale to measure with, I need to have bars that are all the same width, but then I need a key for my bars as well. So you can see that for each character, every time they were a goodie, I've drawn that in blue. If people thought they were a baddie, I've drawn it in red. And if people were undecided, I've drawn it in yellow or orange. So instead of having a gap between each bar, although there's a small gap there, I need a larger gap between each group of bars. Now, boys and girls, your job today is going to be to take a data set like this, but based on all of year 5, and I want you to try and create 2 different types of bar charts or bar graphs. I'd like you to create single bar charts like this, and you can choose whether you want to represent each character that's a goodie, a baddie, or undecided. And then I also want you to create one grouped bar chart that represents something like this, that represents whether people thought each character was a goodie, a baddie, or they were undecided on the same graph, on one graph. Now, when you create those bar graphs about the 6-minute Judgment Day activity, I want you to make sure that your bar graph is easy to read and has a title, has a scale that's marked. So remember, the scale is this bit here. I want you to make sure that you've labeled your graph. So label the character and the number of students. I want to see bars that are easy to read and that have gaps between them, and I want to see a key. Good luck, and don't forget to ask your teacher if you have any questions at all.